Mining community, welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today we actually have a returning guest who appeared back in July 2020, which was episode 86. So go and check that episode out after obviously listening to this. And I want to welcome back Alan Carter, who's the president and CEO of Cabral Gold, a mineral exploration company with a focus on gold and copper with a key asset which is Cuiu Cuiu Gold Project, which is located in northern Brazil. Alan's a geologist by background, and I know he's super passionate about this project, having obviously recorded a podcast last year. And he's someone that's obviously invested his own money in the project. And I'm really keen to get an update on what's been happening for any further development since 15 months ago, and what else has obviously changed in the Brazilian mining industry. So that's welcome Alan to the podcast. How you doing, Alan?
Yeah, I'm well, Rob. Nice to be back. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate your time. And like I mentioned, when we spoke last year, I could see your passion for the project. So I wanted to get you to come back on and sort of give us an update on the project. So for those that haven't listened to the previous episode, I just wanted to give us a snapshot of Cabral Gold.
Yeah, sure. As you said, my name's Alan Carter. I'm the CEO and president and the founder of Cabral Gold. We are a Canadian-listed junior gold exploration company. We have a project called Cuiu Cuiu, as you mentioned, in northern Brazil, Rob. We currently have 2 deposits already defined at Cuiu Cuiu with resources totaling about 1 million ounces. There's quite a lot of upside to both those deposits. Since that resource was completed, resource estimate on those 2 deposits was done in 2018. We've drilled another 25,000 meters, and we currently have 5 rigs turning on the project. So we're planning on drilling another 30,000 meters this year. The project really is district scale. We have 43 targets within an 8-kilometer radius of those 2 deposits. So, and this is in an area called the Tapajos in northern Brazil, which is the site of the world's largest ever gold rush, as a region that happened in the 1980s. So it's a very productive, prolific area, and we believe that there's a number of additional deposits to be discovered there. Okay.
In your opinion, what criteria should an investor sort of in the junior mining sector use when deciding a company, obviously a company like yours, to invest in?
I think the 3 key criteria, Rob, for me at least, as an investor in this sector, are management, management, and management. And I'm not trying to be flippant, but they really are the key things. I mean, what you basically should be looking for as an investor in this sector is a management team that has some technical smarts. Geologists, mining engineers, they know what they're doing. They've got a track record of discovery. And they're qualified to be running one of these companies. That's on its own, though, is not enough. You need a management team that also can raise money. Being smart and being technically competent is no good if you cannot raise money to get work done. So you need to have a management team that can raise money. And I think the most important thing for me, from a management perspective, is I invest in companies where management is putting its own money to work. So I want to be aligned with the management team, and it's interesting once you start digging into, which companies the management team are investing in. Outside of management, obviously the project is very, very important. I look for projects that already have an established resource on it. So I like some downside protection when I invest. So I like to see a resource. I invest in things that have tremendous upside. I'm not looking really at companies that could, the resource could grow by 30 or 50%. I'm looking at companies where the resource could grow by 300, 400, 500% or more than that. A jurisdiction's important. A mining-friendly jurisdiction is very important, and so are the neighbors. You should be looking for companies where that have projects that are either adjacent to big mines or big projects that are in development, where preferably major companies are active. I think, for me, I think that those are probably, I made a few notes here, upside news flow. That's the other key thing. All of what I've just said is great, but if there's no news coming out, then you may have to wait a very long time to see a rise in the share price. So I think news flow, cash, obviously we mentioned that. I think those are the key things. But management is really the key criteria that I use.
Yeah. You've just recently raised some money. Just wonder if you can tell us a little bit about that and how that journey went.
We set out, we were fortunate, we were approached by several brokerage firms earlier this year in the second quarter about the possibility of a bought deal. And so we announced a $10 million bought deal. I think it was back in June. We actually closed on $11.5 million. So the bought deal was upsized in the first week of July. Now, for those of your listeners who don't know what a bought deal is, what a bought deal means, it is basically for us as an issuer, the brokerage firm is guaranteeing the financing. Obviously, what happens when you do a brokered deal is the brokerage firm goes out to look for investors to invest in your offering. But a bought deal means that if they don't get sufficient investors to cover the deal, then they're going to have to put up their own money. So it's a much lower risk proposition for a company like ours, and I think is it's a good indication. It goes back to what I said earlier. It's a good indication that a company can raise money if they're getting bought deals done. So we've just put in $11.5 million into the treasury, and that's allowed us to really upsize the drill program that we're doing too.
Yeah, you sort of the largest shareholder in Cabral. Can you tell us why you've invested so much of your own money in the company?
I am, Rob. And this is not as common as you would think in terms of CEOs and management teams putting in their own money. I mean, you should be looking for, as an investor, in terms of how much money the management team is investing in the company, because obviously when you put your own money at risk, it drives behavior. I mean, I eat, sleep and drink Cabral Gold. Why? Because I got a massive chunk of my net worth at stake here. Why have I put a massive chunk of my net worth at stake in this company? Because I think it has enormous upside, and I think it's a tremendous opportunity. So you're right. I have put a lot of money, my own money, to work in this company. The reason that I put that I am the largest shareholder is because I've basically been in this industry, Rob, for about 30 years now. And I can never recall in all my career, and I've worked in lots of different countries, and I've looked at lots and lots of different gold exploration projects. I've never seen a gold exploration project with this kind of potential. And the reason I say that is because the part of Brazil that we're working in, the Tapajos region, was the largest placer gold belt in Brazil. It is the largest placer gold belt. By placer gold, I mean gold that's being eroded into streams and rivers. There was a huge gold rush that happened here in the 1980s. 1 million people rushed into this area. It's quite remote back then. It's not anymore. And they extracted, the Brazilian government estimates, somewhere between 20 and 30 million ounces of gold from the streams and rivers here. So this was from a whole series of different places, probably 100 different places that were washing gold from the streams. The project that we own was the richest and biggest one. And so I think if you ask most geologists, look, there's this area of placer gold, this region where a lot of placer gold come out of the streams and rivers. Where would you start as a geologist if in terms of looking for the hard rock sources of all this gold, trying to figure out where all this gold is coming from? You'd look first at, or most geologists would look first at the placer gold areas which produce the most amount of placer gold in the streams. And our project, Cuiu Cuiu, was the biggest one. So like I said, we've already got 2 deposits there. We think these 2 deposits explain about 10% of the placer gold. So these 2 deposits have been eroding over millions of years, and about 10% of the gold in the streams we think is explained by these 2 deposits. The question is, where's the other 90% of the gold coming from? There are lots of streams in our area where there was gold recovered in the stream, so we haven't yet found the hard rock deposits. So with 5 rigs running, I think we're optimistic. I'm very optimistic that we're going to make additional discoveries in the next few months.
Yeah. Since we last spoke, there's been obviously some very positive developments in the Tapajos region, particularly with respect to the TZ project, which is adjacent to your project. Can you tell us about those developments and what impacts they could have on your particular project?
Yeah, this again goes to what I was saying earlier about when you invest, look for companies that are in a good jurisdiction with good neighbors. Now, as I said, the Tapajos region is very, very exciting. There is a project next door to us called the TZ project. It is owned currently by Eldorado Gold. They bought it, about 11 years ago now, back in 2010. It's about 2.5 million ounces. And they've done a lot of work on it, feasibility study. They've done a lot of engineering work on it. There's a page on their website. Back in I think it was the second week of August, Eldorado announced that they were selling that project. So that's been sitting on the back burner for quite some time. Eldorado is focused on other jurisdictions. They have mines in Turkey, Greece, and Canada. And they've decided to sell this project for $110 million to a Canadian company called G Mining. Now, G Mining is run by a very, very good set of mine builders. These guys aren't renowned for their exploration prowess, but they are very renowned for their ability to build mines on time, big mines on time and under budget. And these guys, I hear, looked at a lot of different projects when they were looking for a gold project to acquire and build, and they've made a deal with Eldorado to buy this project. Now, that is right next door to us. It is fully permitted. Currently, the deposit is larger than the two deposits that we have. During the gold rush days, however, that project only produced a fraction of the amount of placer gold that our area produced. So their area was about 10% in terms of its historic placer gold production than ours. We think that we've got a much larger district, but it's a very, very positive development, Rob. G Mining, the deal still has to close, but G Mining has just closed on a $70 million bought deal. Very, very large bought deal. They started with $40 million in cash. I'm sure there will be subsequent financings. If you read their investor presentation, they're talking about an aggressive schedule in terms of redoing the feasibility study and making a construction decision on the project by sort of June, the end of the second quarter of 2021. So very big project. This, assuming it does go into production, and it's looking very likely that it will now, albeit with a different owner, this has profound implications for the whole of this region. Why? Because TZ will ultimately be Brazil's third largest gold mine. It'll be a very large open pit gold mine. It will bring a lot of new infrastructure into the project, including a power line. G Mining is talking about putting a grid power. Now, that will bring grid power to within 20 kilometers of our project. Obviously, roads are going to improve. The whole infrastructure is going to improve. It really brings a lot of credibility to our part of the world. And we're right next to them. We're right on their doorstep. Our claims are actually contiguous with theirs. So it's a pretty exciting development, I think, for everybody who's involved in the gold industry in Brazil, and particularly in the Tapajos. So looking forward, and we wish them all the best, and looking forward to their progress with that project.
Yeah. Can you tell us what is special about the Cuiu Cuiu project when compared to sort of other gold exploration projects, maybe within the region and maybe throughout Brazil and even out throughout South America?
Yeah, it's the sheer number of targets that we have here. So we have a district scale project. Now, most projects, TZ is a good example. There's a nice soil anomaly at TZ. It's 2 kilometers long. Eldorado have drilled an awful lot of holes there now, and it's a nice deposit. But there aren't a series of deposits in close proximity within 2 or 3 kilometers. In fact, there aren't a whole sort of number of well-developed targets. Now, it may be that G Mining will identify some new targets there, but Eldorado had that project for 11 years and didn't add any ounces to the resource base, and they did a lot of drilling. G Mining hopefully will have a lot more success. Our project's fundamentally different to that project and most other projects in that there are just so many high-grade quartz veins sticking out of the ground here, so many different showings. So, I mean, for example, in the last 18 months, we've been finding an awful lot of boulders in a number of different areas in the eastern part of the property. Now, these boulders, we think, could explain a lot of the placer gold. The boulders have obviously been eroded from different areas of our property. But some of these boulders are extremely high grade. I mean, one area that we're drilling right now, the boulders average 91 grams a ton. That's 3 ounces a ton, Rob. Right, and we don't yet know where those boulders are coming from. Now, that target is one of 43 that we have. We've got 10 targets outside the 2 deposits within about an 8-kilometer radius, where we've already done a little bit of drilling, not enough to define resources yet, but we've got 10 of these 43 targets which already have high-grade drill intercepts. And I'm talking over some pretty good widths. I mean, one area's we've drilled 27 meters at 6.9 grams. It's not in the resource. It's about 500 meters outside the resource. There's another one where we got 39 meters at 5.1. Earlier this year we drilled 34 meters at 5.4, and another one. It's just very, very uncommon in my experience to come across a project that just has so many excellent quality targets. I mean, look, as a guy who's been in this industry quite some time, I would be thrilled to have, 10% or 20% of the area that we have with 5 or 6 quality targets in it. And we've got 43 so far. Obviously, that presents a challenge because then you need to decide where you're going to focus your limited resources and energies. But I truly believe that we have something that is going to be district scale and that there will be multiple deposits here. As I said, we already have 2 deposits already drilled with 1 million ounces contained within them. They're both open at depth. There's a lot of high-grade mineralization that's not included in that resource estimate from 2018. But I think there will be a number of additional deposits here. Just because we have so many different high-quality targets within close proximity to the 2 known deposits. That's why it's special.
Yeah, no, and it certainly sounds special, especially with all those figures that you just mentioned. What is the significance of the 2 new gold-in-oxide blanket zones that you've recently identified at Cuiu Cuiu?
Yeah, tremendously exciting. So these 2 new Gold-in-Oxide blankets, let me explain first what these things are. These are sort of resulted from erosion of the primary deposits, which are hosted by the underlying intrusive rocks. So over millions of years, these things have been eroding and they've spread out on surface, and the gold has spread out on surface, and it's been eroded into soil and sand and mud. And back in April, we announced that we'd found quite a significant blanket on top of one of the primary deposits, one of the 2 primary deposits I just mentioned called MG. And the reason that we found this now is that we've been drilling a lot of holes along various section lines across the deposit. And we found that the second dimension of this mineralization is quite extensive. Currently, we have this blanket is covering about 20 hectares, but it's growing. It's up to 50 meters thick, probably going to average somewhere around 30, 35 meters thickness would be my guess. It's early days. But all this the gold mineralization in it is in unconsolidated mud and sand. We've just drilled, I think the best hole so far into this blanket is 60 meters at 3.5 grams rock. Now, most of the holes are a lot lower grade than that. They're 0.5 gram, they're 0.6, they're 0.7, they're 1 gram. But I think it's very important to realize that the costs of mining and processing unconsolidated mud and sand and soil are a fraction of what you would probably pay to mine hard rock, what most gold mines cost. So just as a sort of rough estimate, I think a mining and processing cost in most jurisdictions around $25 a ton would be reasonable. Obviously, it's going to vary depending on jurisdiction, depending on the ore type, et cetera, et cetera. This sort of material, we're probably going to be mining and processing it for maybe $2 for the mining cost, processing perhaps 4 or 5. I mean, it is much, much lower cost. And then, of course, you think about the capital cost. The capital cost is much, much lower. And so what does all that translate to? Well, that translates to, material which is averaging 1 gram a ton in this sort of material is probably you're going to need between 5 and 10 grams a ton in hard rock material to create the same sort of margin, the same sort of profit margin. Now, I must stress, look, at Cuiu Cuiu, we don't yet have a scoping study done. Right now, our focus is on discovery. That's where we think we're going to get most value creation. We do think we've got a multi-million ounce district here, but the first blanket is truly very exciting. I mean, not quite apart from the sort of the potential cost implications when we come to defining a PEA. Obviously, all this material, which, as I said, is up to 50 meters thick on surface, was assumed to be sterile back in 2018. It was assumed to be waste material that would have to be moved at a cost. It's not. It's ore. So not only is it going to add a significant number of ounces to the resource estimate, obviously the stripping ratio is going to come down. Because the stripping ratio is lower, the pit depth will get bigger. So it will go deeper. So that will pull in more ounces into the pit at depth. And probably the most important thing, it does start to open up the option of us getting into production much, much quicker than we otherwise would be able to, because the capital cost for this sort of material would be so low. So we found the first oxide blanket. We don't have a resource on it yet, but we've almost completed 74 holes, a grid, an RC grid drill program. The other exciting thing, Rob, you mentioned that we found 2 of these. A couple of months ago, we announced we found a second one. And the second oxide blanket is not sitting above the second hard rock deposit. As I said, we have 2 hard rock deposits. We expect there will be another blanket sitting above the second hard rock deposit. But for logistical reasons, we actually went to another one of these 43 targets where we don't yet have a hard rock resource. And we drilled that before we came onto the second hard rock deposit. And so we came to this other target, which is called Powder Merenda, or PDM, where we don't have a resource yet, but there were some indications from half a dozen historic holes that there could be oxide material very, very similar to MG. And we found another blanket, a second blanket, which is currently about 800 by 300 meters, probably not quite as thick as MG. But the interesting thing about that is not only that we found a second blanket, but it also raises out the possibility of, well, is there a primary deposit sitting in the intrusive rock underneath this second blanket, like the situation at MG? No doubt, we're sure that Central is, or very, very confident that there will be another blanket above Central. So there's a lot of this oxide mineralization, and like I said, it really is. It's a bit like having something, the cream on top of a cup of coffee, arguably the best part of the coffee. No, it's tremendously exciting. But I think investors need to realize that the significance of this, when they look at the grades in this material, it's unconsolidated. There's no drilling and blasting required here. It will just be scooped up. The costs are going to be extremely low. There'll be no grinding. It's tremendously exciting for us. Very exciting.
Yeah. How is Brazil's mining industry sort of developed since we last spoke? Has there been any new changes or developments that we and the audience should know about? There has been a number of. Brazil has a very well-developed mining industry. So Kinross's biggest mine. So for those of your listeners that have come across, are familiar with Kinross, it's one of the industry's largest producers. Their biggest gold mine is in Brazil, and it's Brazil's biggest mine. It's called Paracatu. It's over 500,000 ounces. So that keeps powering away. There's tens of million ounces of Paracatu. Last year, I think they produced about 530,000 ounces. Kinross is active in country. You've got Anglo Gold, which is also very active in country. They've got 2 big mining complexes. You've got Yamana that runs the Jacobina mine. You've got Lundin Mining that has Chapada. Lundin Mining bought Chapada about 2 years ago now for about $800 million. So there's quite a lot happening here. You've got Equinox Gold, which is one of the fastest growing gold producers in country. They've just announced that they're going to put the what's the name of one of the projects into production, Santa Luz. That will be their 4th mine in Brazil. You've got Horizonte mining on the nickel side that is currently raising money to a very large nickel project in the same state as us in Pará.
there's a lot going on, Rob, in the mining space. Obviously, COVID has slowed things down, particularly last year. We certainly suspended our project work on our project for 3 months, but it's an important contributor to the economy, and there's a very deep pool of talent with lots of very, very smart people in Brazil. And Brazil, obviously, is commodity rich. This is a place where you can work 12 months of the year. So that goes to what I was saying about news flow. I live in Canada, but there is northern Canada, basically it's very difficult to work in the winter, and there are lots of places like that, and we can work 12 months of the year. So there's drill news 12 months of the year. It's a good place. It's a very good place to invest, because there is that mining infrastructure. The Carajás mining complex, which is on the other side of our state, on the eastern side of the state, is the world's largest iron ore mining complex. So it's a big producer of things like iron ore, bauxite, copper, gold, nickel, probably several other things that I can't remember.
Yeah. So as a conclusion, what can investors expect in terms of sort of news flow? Obviously, you mentioned news flow a few times, and potential catalysts over the next 12 months. What will be your priorities?
Yeah, news flow, critically important. As I said, this goes back to your initial question. For us, we've got 5 rigs turning, and so we've got a 30,000 meter drill program planned over the next 9 or 10 months. So through to the end of June, we have a fully funded drill program. So it's really all about drilling. I think most of our drilling will go into defining the high grade zones within our project, both within the 2 known deposits and within a couple of those other targets where we currently don't have a resource, but we have some very good drill holes. So really defining high grade resources on our project is kind of key. In addition to that, however, we're going to continue to drill off these oxide blankets. As I said, I'm very confident, very optimistic. I don't want to guarantee anything in our business, but I'm very optimistic there'll be a third blanket and possibly more of these oxide blankets. So secondary objective will be to continue that program and make more of those kind of discoveries, because they are so attractive from an economic perspective. And we are going to be doing some diamond drilling on some of the other 43 regional targets where, as I said, we've got cracking boulders and very high-grade veins sticking out of the ground. And so really, the potential catalyst for us over the next 12 months, Rob, is really all about discovery. And so I think a lot of people, again, investors, they like to have production. And indeed, everybody likes to have cash flow and see that the company is making money. But actually, if you look at where you really get the big value jump, it's actually at the discovery stage. So that is the most important thing, to look for companies that have a very, very good chance of making significant discoveries going forward. Beyond that, probably around about this time next year or towards the end of next year, we'll look to update the resources. We'll certainly put all the information on the website as we get it back. All the different sections will be on the website as we advance with the drilling. But there's an awful lot happening, so it's tremendously exciting. I think we've got drilling planned on 14 or 15 targets over the next 10 months.
Okay. Alan, really appreciate your time, and it's an exciting journey. It seems that you've got planned ahead, and I know how, obviously, like I mentioned in the introduction, how passionate you are about this project and the potential it has. So our audience hopefully will follow your progress, and look forward for you to coming on the podcast next year with an update and see how things progress.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Rob. And if anybody has any questions for me, you can contact me through the website, info@cabralgold.com, or you can contact me directly at Alan@cabralgold.com. Please drop me a line. Love to hear from you.
Yes, certainly. I was just going to go on to that and ask how can our audience get in contact with you? We'll put all those details in the show notes. So, audience, if you've got any questions that you want to ask Alan, please get in contact with him. Like you can hear, Alan's really passionate about this project, and there certainly is a lot of upside to what they're doing there. And like you mentioned, investors, certainly there is a lot of upside over the next few years. So if you want to reach out to Alan, please get in contact. So I hope you guys enjoyed listening. Appreciate if you can share and like this episode, pass this episode on to other people within the industry, people that you know, maybe investors, or even just other people within the mining industry that would be interested in listening about a potential discovery in South America and obviously namely Brazil. So appreciate your continued support. And until next time, happy mining.